In our society, we hear the slogan, love is love. What are your thoughts on that slogan, and what does the Bible say about it?
In our woke society, all of that, love is this sloppy agape. Like anything goes, we just love. It's a bit like the hippies back then, peace, but it's like all this war was going on and drugs and craziness. There was no peace, it was craziness. So we come up with this slogan of love, but I think God is love. So the originator of love is the one who defines love. Welcome to Nothing's Off Limits, and we are here with some college students that are asking questions that their friends want to know about. And so we're going to be talking about relationship. We're going to be talking about the S word, sex. We're going to be talking about gender issues. We're going to be talking about relationship. We're going to be talking about religion. Nothing's off limits. And so we're going to just jump right in. And I've got my panelists here. We've got Yahaira Ramirez and Chris Freitag and myself. And we are going to answer to the best of our ability. So don't put us on the spot. We don't know the answer. We'll try to figure it out and let you know. But it's going to be a lot of fun today. So we're going to start off. Who wants to start off? Elder. All right.
Okay, thank you. My question is how to find the right partner.
How do you find the right partner?
Yeah.
Right. So for the married guys, we want to take that. We want to start off, Chris. How do you find the right partner and not find the wrong one?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, trying to find the right partner, first you have to understand who you are. Reading the Bible and understanding God, but understanding who you are as a person. And so as you're looking for out there, looking for people and trying to find a partner, you're going to want somebody that has the same values and the same characteristics, the same likes and the things that you like to do as you're searching, you're talking, maybe dating, and you're trying to find out who they are. But it really starts out with your foundation about who you are as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. The Bible says don't be unequally yoked with an unbeliever. And so what does it mean to be unequally yoked? It means you don't have those same values. And I don't think it's just with unbelievers, but you can even have people who are so-called Christians, but they maybe are not really living the life of Christians or having the values of Christians. So when you're unequally yoked, you have a different value system. And so it's not just about finding someone I'm attracted to or someone I think I can do life with, but how are we going to do life together? When we have children, are we going to church? When it comes to giving, are we going to give? How are we going to serve God in our life? And so having someone who shares those similar values, so when we come together, what does it mean to be yoked? It means joined together, that there's that similar values and belief system. And so I think, for men, it's finding a woman that can support that, because the Bible says the woman is the helpmeet, it's the helper. And so you want to find a woman who's not just pretty, you're just attracted to, but, is not going to be happy. And so, Samson had Delilah. She was pretty, but she seduced him and he lost his anointing. He lost his ministry. And so it's not just about that, but someone who can come alongside and support. And I think for a woman, it's important because as the man is the head of the home, you have to help the husband and follow him. But what if the man's going someplace you don't want to go? Why do people end up in divorce? It's because, what does it mean to have different vision? Divorce means a diversity of vision and things don't last. So I think those are things important to talk about and to, begin to look at when you're doing the dating process before you give your heart to someone, before it gets too serious. Is this someone I could be yoked with and see myself with and do life with? If not, I don't want to get serious. I don't want to, until I get to know that person. And then if I'm going to jump into a marriage, it's a lifelong commitment. Then I need to know that this is someone not perfect, but they have the same values. And anything, Harry?
Yeah, I mean, as someone, who's, I don't want to say of age, but, I'm single, I'm in that season. I think a big thing is just looking at the person's character, like if there is somebody that I'm interested in, or, there's multiple opportunities to befriend somebody, and you start noticing what's this person like? Is this person, does he emulate Jesus? Is he committed to not just Christ but to the church? Does he serve? And looking at those qualities, and I think that's kind of the precursor, and then from there things can shift or change or whatever. But if there is somebody that I'm interested in, like that's what I'm looking at. Like, what's this person's character? What's this person's personality? And then from there, like, I think we might get into that a little bit later. But just looking at those qualities, and if it's something that, I was like, oh, okay, like I see, God on this person. I see, the influence that they have. And, we have similar interests, like Chris was saying. And I think that's kind of like, the beginning. And from there, I mean, there's, counsel that you can get into and ask people. Like, I think it's important to surround yourself with leaders as well. That's like, hey, like I have feelings for somebody. And, ask them what their thought process is and like, do they see something that I don't? So I think I went a little bit further, but definitely like personality and character and their commitment would be,
I think, looking at how do you do that? Of course, conversation, but then also look at their friends.
Yeah.
How are they acting around their friends? And then 2, look at their family. How do they treat their family? How's their relationship with the family? All of that. And that's where you can see people when they're not on their best behavior. Because when you meet someone, they're always on their best behavior, you go out, there's a joke, you go out and the girl eats nothing, and she's very particular. And then after you've been dating a while, she's like, do you want to eat that? And she's eating your food too. So, we let the hair down and we, the reality of a person it comes out. And so, yeah, I think looking at their life and getting to do that. And then, there's not be perfection, but I think, what are the main values? I think it's the love for God, the calling in life, what are they called to do? Because you're going to be journeying on that journey together, and so like for me, when I got with my wife, I was a missionary. And so I told her, but when we were dating, I said, hey, I'm a missionary. If God called me to China, if God calls me somewhere, would you go? And she was like, yeah, of course I would, but if she had said, no, I don't ever want to leave Singapore, I probably wouldn't have continued a relationship. Not that I didn't like her and we didn't have things to call, but like I knew that was the call of God on my life. And so we want people that are going the same direction. Not that they have to be exactly like us, but they're open to that. If not, how are we going to obey what we want to do? And then we're torn because we love someone and they don't want to go the same direction and we're going different directions. Yeah. So hope that's the answer. Any other questions along that line? Yeah.
All right. So thank you very much. I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So I'm a Christian, and based on what I've understood today, the person's values should align with my values and interests. So should a religion be a barrier if the person is not a Christian?
I would say definitely, because if they're not a Christian, how are you going to raise your kids? How are you going to, you want to go to church and worship God and they don't want to go. How's that going to affect your Sunday? Now you have children and you want them to be raised as a Christian, and then they don't want them to have anything to do with church. How is that going to work? And so I think, the basic yoking of not being unequally yoked is that we both are believers, because the Bible is full of values. It's full of the ways of God. And if they don't embrace those ways, and the Bible is the standard, then we're not going to have a strong foundation to build on, And so I think definitely that's there. And then even I said in that, there's different Christians. There's nominal Christians. There's those that, and we're not here to judge them, but like, I want someone who's like me. If I'm really on fire, I want someone who's on fire. If I'm not on fire and I get someone who's on fire, it's also going to be a problem. And so I think those are the things we look at. But I think as a Christian, it says don't be unequally yoked with an unbeliever. That's the basic of it, because it's going to cause conflict. Now, if you get saved and someone's not a believer, then the Bible says stay with that person, Paul says in Corinthians, and believe that through your life, your testimony, it'll be a witness to them and they'll come to the Lord. As one is saved, the whole household is saved. But don't do missionary dating where we're like, oh, I'm going to transform, I'm going to change this person, because it usually doesn't happen, and so you don't want to get that. And then when you get emotionally involved in that, it's much harder. Is that clear? Good follow-up. Any other follow-up? We good?
Okay. You did talk or touch on the subject of divorce. And I know in our society today, divorce is very prevalent, either in like our parents or grandparents or even people we know. What are some steps or I guess like mindsets we can take or take on so we can avoid that?
Avoid divorce. Yeah, I think again, it goes back to we're talking about the values. So like, what do we believe about marriage? And so people just say, well, we just got married because it's just about a ceremony and a party. But marriage is a covenant where we invite God to witness a marriage and come into the center of that. So it's two people, a man and a woman, before God and before the witnesses, making a covenant, to love and to cherish in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, until death do us part. And so, and inviting God in as a holy ordinance, so those are part of the vows that we say. So as Christians, we believe that when we get married, divorce is not an option. Now, other Christians that have been divorced, does God forgive? Yes, of course. It's not the unforgivable sin, but our goal is never to get divorced. And so we have the same values with someone like that. That's where we have that same commitment, which means what? We're going to work through things, Up until 19, I think it was 70, divorce, you can only have divorce for adultery, for immorality, or abuse. But then they came up and we call what they call irreconcilable differences, which means that we can't agree on something, so we get divorced. So basically, it enables anyone to get divorced. If we, don't agree on something, let's just call it quits. But as a Christian, we need to work through those differences and be committed and believe God will help us. And really, when we're getting married, what are we doing? That person is helping us become more like Jesus. Because men, and women, opposites attract, but then after marriage, opposites attack. So our opposites, the things that are different, they sometimes become irritations, but we need to overcome. And then many times we marry someone who their strength is our weakness. Our weakness is their strength. And so what happens? There's conflicts that's there. And so we need to help each other to grow and look to God for God's help, and know that no person, we have all these movies, you complete me and all this, that's nonsense. Only God completes us, And so understanding what God's help that's there. So I think setting out not to get divorced. Yahira mentioned earlier about getting some counseling. So get people that can help us to talk about stuff we don't think about, because we're just thinking about the wedding, coming together, like, how many kids do you want? I want, one boy, one girl, and 2 dogs, and like all the, but like, how are you going to deal with finances? How are you going to deal with your in-laws? What's your plan and career? Who's going to work when you have kids? Like all this stuff to talk through, so that you can look and see, is there commonality and agreement on stuff, or are we having disagreements we need to work through first before we make a lifelong covenant? And then, of course, things come up. We all need help. There's people around us that have wisdom, that have been married longer, or leaders that can come and help us navigate stuff when it's difficult, and we all need that at sometimes.
I just want to add like 2 things. Even I know you guys aren't married, but as you were thinking about, when you get to that place, I think I read it or somebody told me there's 2 things I wanted to share. Because divorce is so high in our society right now. I remember reading somebody asked like an elderly woman, like, why wasn't divorce such a big thing back in the day? And the lady responded saying, because we grew up in a generation where when something was broken, we fixed it. We didn't just toss it to the side. And then another point that somebody else told me, I think it might have been a friend of mine, was also the fact that when there is conflict in a relationship or in a marriage, always remember it's you two versus the problem, not you versus the other person. So I never forgot those things. And I think when you mention mindsets, it's like those mindsets to have of like working things out, like Pastor said, and also not just thinking like irreconcilable differences, but like inviting God into the situation and how do we move forward to avoid getting divorced? Because what do we say when we get married? It's like, what God brought together, let no man separate. So
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, I'd like to add also just wise counsel. You were talking about covenants. So when you get into a marriage, you have a covenant with God, but you have a covenant now with a spouse. And it's the 2 of you that come together to make one. And there are going to be disagreements. And that's a fact. But that covenant comes with wise counsel. You surround yourself with people that are going to give you good advice. You don't go share with just everybody that you want to share with, because everybody can blow with the wind with their own opinions. And so it's important to just have wise leaders as you're dating and you're moving up and then you get married, that you still have the solid foundation to surround yourself with wise people and good counsel to help you walk through difficult seasons and times. Because those of us that have been married, whether you've been married for a year, 5 years, or 20 years, you've learned something, you've journeyed through it, and you're there and you can help other people get through those difficult situations.
Yeah, I love it. And I think, what you're saying, just to follow up on that, get advice from successful people. If you want advice on business, you don't get advice from the homeless person. Right? If you want advice on marriage, get advice from people who've been married a long time. And, I think what Yahira is saying, great advice. It's wisdom that's there. But, you got to look for that advice to be there. But what happens is when we're disgruntled, we call our girlfriends who just got jilted by their boyfriend and they're angry with men right now. That's probably not the best advice. Or you call someone who's divorced, oh yeah, just change the locks, kick him out. It's like, that's not the best advice. So get advice from healthy people that are there. And I'm not saying we cut off all of our friends that are not, struggling in areas, but don't ask for advice from them. Get advice from people that are successful. Yeah. Good question. Any other question on that line? Follow up? Yeah.
And so along the same lines with that question, but how do you keep your marriage healthy and avoid getting overly comfortable?
Good question.
Yeah, it's a great one, and I really like it because I just celebrated with my wife our 11-year anniversary yesterday, and amazing, 11 years. But what I learned is that my wife and I, we didn't do something super extravagant yesterday to celebrate it. We did go out to dinner, do something a little different. We went to an escape room together, something we've never done. So I would say to keep lively and from getting stagnant is you got to keep thinking about, like, what did you do when you first dated each other? We have a saying, the two of us, it's phase one forever. And what that means is that we knew what we were like when it was in the season before we got married. That's like phase one. There's a phase 2, 3, and 4 as you move along. But if you can remember what phase one was of what you kindled, what you liked, and what you did, and the happiness, the joy that you had, you got to stay ahead of that and think of those creative ways. Well, 11 years can weigh on you sometimes, right? But if you remember phase one, why did you get married in the first place? What was the fun things that you did? And rekindle that. Think of spontaneity. Think of things that are just different, and they're not the same stagnant things that you just go out on a date every year and you say, you celebrate your anniversary right now. So just think outside the box, and spontaneity, I think, is a key there.
Proverbs tells us, I forget which proverb, but it says, choose to love the one you have chosen. And so I think that's the issue. In our day and age, we talk about, I'm falling out of love. I fell out of love. I don't love anymore and all that. And it's like a fleeting feeling that love just flew out the window one day. But that's not true. And so, psychologists will tell us the first year, 1 to 3 years being married is called the honeymoon years. And you're just happy playing house and decorating the kitchen and, doing all this stuff, But then sometimes children come in that period. And then year 3 to year 10 is the building years. And so what does it mean? You're building a life together. It's no longer just about romance and the honeymoon, but now we're building a life together, which is work, kids, changing diapers, learning to sacrifice for each other. And, that's where the quirky things in each other comes out that we didn't know that were there. Like, who is this person? I didn't know you were this person, because you're not on your best behavior anymore. And most marriages don't last that. Most marriages end between the first 10 years. Wow. But if you can get through, the honeymoon stage, the building years, then you enter into what we call the mature love stage, where now you've learned to have an ebb and flow and learn how to help that person be a help in complementing each other, and you get into that mature love that's there. And so it's important to, recognize that and, keep the honey in the honeymoon, keep the love in there, which I think was Chris was saying. So don't take each other for granted, continue to express, because we can get busy. Kids take the limelight, a lot of time, which is great. Children are great. But, like I always tell my kids, I said, look, Mom and I were here before you were here, and we're going to be here after you're here, and you all get married. And so we have to live with each other. But, that's another problem. And what happens when the kids all leave the house, the husband and wife look at each other like, I don't like you anymore, and what they're talking about divorce, because it was all just about the children. And so we need to be intentional. Keep dating your spouse. How do you keep the honey and the keep dating each other, keep spending time with each other, set time apart to communicate. The average couple doesn't communicate less than 15 minutes a day.
Wow.
So think about that's good morning, good night, and all that. They don't communicate. So take time out to communicate every day. And to hear each other's heart and do that, and to date each other, and to appreciate each other. And don't take each other for granted. I think we do those 3 things, we're going to have a good chance. And when things come up, get help, get advice, get counsel, like we said before. Yeah. Good. Any follow-up on that? Go ahead.
The thing I wanted to ask is, we are talking about marriage, keeping marriage and all these things. Now, my big question is, what is even love? What is love itself? Is it just a feeling or is something? What is love itself? Yeah.
So how do you define love? We talk about love and marriage. How do you define love? You don't want to take that one?
That's a big question. I think, there's different types of love as we've learned, right? I think, I forget, there's 4 types of love. And I'm forgetting the last 2, but I know 2 of them are, one is the agape love, which is the unconditional kind of love that God gives to us, him as our father, as our creator. And there's Phileo, I think is the other love. Yeah, so friendship, brotherly, comes from, Philadelphia is known as the city of brotherly love, and that's where you get the word from. So it's like, when you're friends with each other, like, you guys get along as brothers, like that's the kind of love that you have for your friends, for your family. So I think it depends on, what kind of love we're talking about. Do you want to remind me of the other 2?
Eros.
There you go. Oh, yeah. I'll let you take it.
So Eros is romantic love. It's attraction. It's physical attraction, and those things. So again, what's the highest love? Agape love. And so we need to have that unconditional love, which really is a commitment. God so loved the world, he gave. Why? He gave Jesus. He loved. Jesus laid down his life. Why? Because he was committed to us. When he created man, even though man failed, man was rebellious, God didn't stop loving. And so I think that's the agape, that we choose to love even when the person isn't being lovable, and then also the phileo, continue to keep friendship there. People say we talk about who to marry. You marry your best friend. My wife and I were friends serving together, in a big group. I had many leaders. She was one of my leaders, for those that know the story, but we were just friends for 5 years. I have lots of girlfriends. Not that I'm dating lots of girls, but we go out in groups. I had, a healthy relationship with men, women, and boundaries there. And we're doing, but then, I look like I found her attractive in that sense. And also like, we're good friends. And so, after that, we dated for about a year. I proposed and we got married a year later. And so it wasn't a long thing because we already had the foundation of friendship. I think that's the foundation of friendship. That's there. Romantic love ebbs and flows. It's not always this passion like you see in the movies and all of that. It's Hollywood, and so there is that romantic, there is the physical love that's there, but that's not the most important thing that's there. I think that's the glue that keeps marriage together, and it's important to have intimacy in a marriage, and God designed that. It's a blessing, but that can't be the only thing. That can be the main focus, because that ebbs and flow. Your wife's eventually going to get pregnant and have kids, and she's not going to feel sexy. We're going to get older, and no matter what, we're not always going to have our 6-pack or 8-pack, so things change. So it's not about that. Sam's just laughing. You think it's true, Sam. It's not true. All right. So like that outward just attraction, that's the lowest love. And we use love like I love my dog, I love ice cream, I love my wife, I love my kids, like I love God, but it's not the same kind of love. Yeah. So I think when you look at that portrayal, it kind of makes it there. But agape, we're committed to love. I choose to love the one I've chosen, and I'm choosing to invest in that person, and that's love, even when they're not lovable.
I think you said it good before, Pastor, that love, it's action. It requires work to love somebody. And it takes an effort, and even just like you said, you have to put in the work, even when you don't feel like loving, that you have to do things to show that you're loved. And so when people say that they fell out of love, it's just because I think they gave up and they didn't continue to put in the effort and put in the work that's required.
Yeah, and I think, and it's the Hollywood love. It's just the Eros of romanticism. And so why do people commit adultery? I think you don't love the life that you have and appreciate it. So you would go outside of marriage and be looking there. But when you're married, are you still attracted to other women? Yes. What do you mean? You can't see another woman? They're like, no. Elders like, no. Yes. You still, but you don't entertain that attraction. If someone's pretty, it's that's a beautiful woman, and you move on. You don't begin to pursue. That's the difference. Can a married woman look at a man and be like, yeah, my watch, we went to watch Brad Pitt movie. I'm like, hey, you're getting too excited. calm down, because and we joke about it, but we can acknowledge that, but we don't pursue it, and we don't allow anything to come in between our marriage, and entertaining anything. Again, our best friend, we keep that within the marriage. Can we have other friends and yeah, we can, but nothing comes between the relationship that we have. We protect that. And so that's the bond, which I think if we don't learn self-control in doing that and learn to grow ourselves individually, back to what we were talking about, two unhealthy people are going to have an unhealthy marriage. Yeah. One healthy person, one unhealthy person, it's still unhealthy. We need to be two healthy individuals. Not that we're perfect, but when we're healthy, we come together, we're going to have a healthy marriage.
Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Follow up? Ethan, go ahead.
For the next question, so going back before marriage, so talking about dating, how long should you date before getting married? And then how do you know that the person you're dating is the one that you want to marry?
Okay, how long should we date before marriage? And then how do you know it's the person? So you should date it exactly 13 years and 4 days. No, okay. Yeah. Anyone want to jump in there?
Yeah, great question. I there's no timetable. Some people say, well, you have to date for this many months, and you don't have to. I mean, my wife and I ended up getting married. We rekindled again after we've known each other for a long time, and within 6 months we were married. And people were like, well, that was quick. And they were like, how did you know? Well, we knew because we understood, like, as we talked, as we dated, going back to like having values and having the understanding. So as long as you understand what direction you're going, you have the same similar goals, and like Pastor was saying earlier, you're rowing the same direction, the same values, and the same things that you're looking for, your vision in life. I don't think there's a timetable for it. So it could be as early as a month, it could be 3 months, it could be 6 months in that retrospect.
So I think, it goes back to, did you have a friendship? Like for me, the relationship with them, but I'd known Susan for 5 years. And so we were not like we just met and got married 6 months later, a year later. And so, after you date someone for around 6 months, you should know whether it's possible to live life with this person. If you don't know that person, some people, they've been dating for 5 years and the guy still hasn't popped the question. That guy has got issues or he's not serious. He's not serious, because you will know, And so I think, in this day and age, I'm not for long dating and long engagements, because there's so much pressure to sin, and to move quickly in things. So, having self-control, those things are good. But if you're, dating for so long, it's very hard to keep the boundaries there, you have an urge for a merge and you're like, and it's like, but, things aren't lining up the natural. So I think the better question is like, what season am I in? Am I in a season where I'm moving towards marriage? If I'm not, then what am I dating for? Am I dating to practice on someone else's husband, or dating to practice on someone else's wife? So thinking about that, because what is the point of dating? It's to get married. And so, we can go through the old, how they did their parents would actually arrange, they met the guy, they came together, families would arrange, and then they wouldn't see each other until the guy came to propose, and then they got married immediately. But to ensure purity. Now, I'm not saying that's a bit old school. I mean, it's not culturally relevant today. But why are we dating? I don't think God ever intends us to date 10, 15 people, and then now you have people you're connecting with, physically, and they're having sex together. And what happens? It's not just a physical joining, but it's an emotional joining, a spiritual joining. And then they're carrying around all these soul ties, and it's very hard for them to connect with someone. So are we in the season of marriage? If not, enjoy being single. Can you date? And but don't get too serious. Keep it in the friendship zone. Keep it in the place where we have boundaries there. And I was talking to someone this weekend, and who tell me their friend got married, and this girl dated the other friend, and then the friend got married. They didn't continue in the relationship, and then the best friend ended up dating that girl and marrying her, and the guy was the best man in the wedding. I'm like, that's weird. How does that work out? Like, but they said because we kept boundaries, we were just friends, and so we realized we weren't the most compatible, but because we didn't cross the boundaries, we were good friends, and we're all friends now, and we could do that. And I think that is the key. But when you cross the line and there's heartbreak and bitterness and all of this stuff that happens, you have to sever relationship. How can you be friends? You know, we say, let's just be friends. You're never going to be just friends. The relationship is severed. So knowing the season you're in and looking at dating for marriage, but if you keep the right boundaries and you realize, hey, you know, I don't see the compatibility, or like, you know, I really feel this direction in life, you're not, you can just be friends. And you can do that, you know, without having heartbreak. But when you cross the line and you get into soul ties and you get into this, or, you know, as a man, we say things too quickly, planning for the future, talking, and then we take our words back. Or for a woman, that's where we can get into trouble, you know, where, because it's like we're now breaking our promises and our word. But if we could do that, I mean, you know, I think to just meet somebody and have a month where you're proposing getting married, that's, you know, run off to Vegas and just, no, don't do that. It's a lifelong commitment.
Yeah.
But I think when you know, you're never going to have enough money, do things simply. But again, do you have the God criteria there and being equally yoked and moving forward? And is it the season? You know, most people now are marrying later. You look now, you know, women are marrying usually after 25, between 26, 27. Men are 28 to 30s, because I think people are taking a step back and being like, we don't want to mess this up. But on the other hand, people are living like they're married and they're not married, and they just move in together like, let's try and play house. But that sets us up for brokenness and destruction. I don't think that's God's original intention. Yeah, so good question. Any follow-up on that?
Well, okay, thank you very much. So you talked about not crossing the line whilst dating or whilst being friends. So my question would be, how do you avoid the temptation whilst being friends or whilst dating so that you both don't defile yourself before marriage?
Okay, great question for you, Hyra. Is it? Okay.
Well, it was funny. I kind of wanted to go back into what we were talking about, and then that may even segue into that. I think, you know, because most of you guys are college age. So one thing that Pastor said was like, you know, recognizing the season. And I mean, like right now, I think most of you are focused on like, you know, finishing school. So definitely important to do that. And then I think when it comes to like dating and, you know, how do you know if it's the right person, or how do you know, like, you know, if you're, I don't remember word for word what the question was, but about like being married, right? I think it's definitely important. And I'm going to touch on this just because I'm very passionate about it, is like, enjoy the season that you're in. Like, I think so much of our culture is like, you're in this season. I was literally just talking to somebody about this yesterday, of like, you think of like fall, winter, summer, you know, like we're in fall right now, but we're already looking forward to winter. And it's like, are we even enjoying the fall and the leaves and, you know, all of that? And it's always, you get to the next season and you're already looking forward to the next. So where you are in life, whether that's in school, maybe, you know, some of you are getting ready to graduate, enjoying where you are and making the most of it, because you're never going to get this time back. So it's a gift. And I think recognizing that it's a gift and knowing that, you know, when the time comes, like the Bible says, I think in Matthew, like, seek first the kingdom of God and everything will be added to you. So know and trust that you will get to that place, you know, when you're ready to date, you're ready to, you know, settle down, and you're going to recognize that, okay, I'm ready. And another thing is about being whole. I think it's important to be whole in knowing who you are, knowing your identity, and walking in that, because so many people, you know, get into relationships and they're like looking for somebody to complete them, but really only God can fulfill you. So when you're fulfilled and you find this person that's also fulfilled, it's like it's one and one becoming one with God, but you avoid so many conflicts and problems that you could have dealt with before you brought somebody else into the picture. So that's one thing I had to say. But going back to Enoch, your question, I think one word that we all have to embed into our vocabulary is boundaries. Boundaries, Pastor, you say this all the time, fences make good neighbors. So that's just more of a picture, but having the right boundaries, like if you are dating somebody, you know, don't go out by yourself at like 11 o'clock at night to go watch a movie or something, because, you know, there is that temptation to cross the line. And if you put yourself in that position, then you're only making it easier to fall into that temptation. So I think it's important, if you are dating, like, go out in groups, get to know the person in a group setting, and spend time, not by yourselves, but with friends. And I think that gives you even more opportunity to see, like, how they interact with other people, and just get to know them without the pressure, but also to safeguard both of you so you don't do anything you're going to regret later. But I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, very good. I think so. It's putting boundaries there, but I think boundaries we look at as like, oh, like this is a control. But I think we have to look at, if I really respect this person, I don't want to ever put them in a position where I would shame them, And so, so when I was dating my wife, she was my wife then, but we were dating, I was never because I was living in a house by myself and I had roommates, but I never would have her come over to my house if someone wasn't home. And so why? Because I don't want to be, the Bible says, avoid the appearance of evil. Yeah. So I don't want to be, sitting with her on the couch and someone walks in and we're just there and someone thinks, oh, what were you doing? And then it shames her as a woman, and brings a question on her modesty, or me as a man of God, because I was already a pastor. And so avoiding those appearance of evil, and not that I was struggling or, but like, don't trust yourself. And so I think that's the greatest advice that my senior pastor at the time told me. Don't trust yourself. Always put proper boundaries and accountability. So for me, I'm never in a room, even as a married man, I'm never in a room with another woman by myself, unless it's my girls, But like the door's open, someone's there. We have glass, when we're there. Why? Because to protect. I never would go to lunch with a woman by myself. That's not my wife. Why? And I have lots of people and, spiritual daughters and a lot of them, but like, I don't want to put them in a position where they're uncomfortable, or someone would come and question my loyalty to my wife. Now, people would say, well, that's crazy. Who cares what people think? But it's wisdom. And so, men used to be called gentlemen because they knew how to treat a woman. A woman was called a lady because she knew how to behave and with respect. And I think that's something that's been lost, and we just cheapen sex. We cheapen. It's like you watch the movies, and when I would travel overseas, I meet people and they think Americans have sex all the time with everybody. You go on your first date and I'm like, no, it's not true. It's like, but all they watch is Hollywood. They think that's how it is. And like, how stupid is that? Like, you meet somebody and shack up and like, you're giving your soul to this person. And they don't understand the seriousness of it. So we have a wrong mindset. So I think, when you're putting boundaries there, avoid getting physical, because people say, well, as long as I don't cross the line, as long as there's not penetration, we didn't actually commit sex. So it's just foreplay. But what does the word foreplay mean? Be foreplay. So if you're involved in foreplay, what's going to happen? You're going to be tempted to play. Right? And so we've got to understand that and know, and God's for marriage, but, don't put the line here at the fence, and then what? You get so close you fall off. Put the boundary back so you don't end up falling off the cliff. And so I think that's the thing, being in public with people, not being alone, not talking too intimate, not, if you kiss goodnight, say goodnight, but don't take 20 minutes to say goodnight. And having those boundaries that's there, women are more emotionally stimulated, and then they use the physical to get the emotion. For men, they'll use emotion to get physical. They want the physical, and so men are more physically, and they're the pursuers. So I think as men, we have to protect and know that about ourselves, and not allow ourselves to get stirred up, to the point where we're tempted to cross the line, and respect and treat them as ladies. Be that gentleman. And then for women also, we have that responsibility. It's just not the man's responsibility, but to put those boundaries there. And I think, the world puts too much emphasis on the physical, before we're connecting intellectually, emotionally, we jump right into the physical. But the physical should be the last thing, that's there. And that's again why, if you really know when you're connecting that way, don't take long and then you fall into sin. I think, again, knowing your season, but if you have the right person, it's your season, then why are you waiting? Well, we want to save money for 5 years, but would you rather fall into sin? And it's like, it just doesn't make sense. So I think That's my advice. Put those boundaries there, respect, do things to where you protect yourself. And I think the woman will respect you for it. And, and the guy also will be respectable because he's walking that way and standing outside, and what does it mean to be a man? Being a real man is being like Christ. Just because you can have sex doesn't make you a man. It makes you a male. And so a real man is someone who's like Christ, who prefers others over himself and treats with respect and walks in the fear of God. Because to me, this is somebody's daughter. Yeah. This is someone's son. And ultimately it's God's son and God's daughter. Yeah. So when we think like that, it puts things in a different perspective. That's Chris, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, and I love the part about accountability. You think, well, that's kind of weird. Like, I'm going to go on a date or spend time with them. I have to have accountability, but it's friendships and it's going out in groups if you have to. If you really value and cherish the person that you're seeing or you're thinking about having a relationship with, then you're going to look forward to the effort and the time that you put into it. You might go to your friend and say, hey, look, like, I really like this person. I really value them and I want to treat them with the utmost respect. I need you to help keep me on the narrow and walk the line so that I can make sure that I'm accountable, so that I do the right things. Not to say that we're going to do the wrong things, but to have somebody there that's going to have your back. Yeah. And those are the same people that you want, your accountability people. And that one day that you're there at the wedding, that they're there also as part of the wedding party, because they're going to be their lifelong friends. So
very good. And I say, anyone who's pressurizing you to do something, if you love me, you would do this. They don't love you. That's manipulation. If you really love someone, you protect them. You're not going to shame them. You're not going to, we're in love. It's okay. God understands. No. God has set up an order which brings protection. And if there's no protection in a marriage, what happens? Insecurity comes in. All these relationships end up going south. I've seen godly people come together and like they had what it took. And because they crossed the line, insecurity came in, manipulation, all that, and the relationship was destroyed because they crossed the line. Because there's no protection, in the covenant. And so we need to understand that. Yeah. Good. Any follow-up questions on that? Yeah. Elder.
My question would be, what should I look for in someone before I start dating them?
Look for in them before you start dating them.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think you want to add anything to that. We talked about values, being equally yoked to them in that. But I think, I always say to find someone say, who's a person you can marry? Number one, you got to have physical attraction. There's people that got married, but they never consummated. Because they just married a friend. You can't marry your sister. That's weird, or a brother. You know what I'm saying in that? Because there's got to be physical attraction. That's important, but that's not the main thing. 2 is the values, which is very important. Looking at the values of that person and how they value their honesty, their integrity, common values. 3 is the call of God on their life. What are they called to do? If someone's called to ministry, it takes somebody who understands that world, or someone who's also called to ministry. So, I say even more, if you're called to ministry or you need someone who understands that or is called with you in there. Because if not, it's going to be a strain because it takes a demand on you. So are you called to be an entrepreneur? Do you have someone that can support you there? Are you called to travel, the nations? Is it somebody who hates to travel and doesn't ever want to get a passport? It's going to have a problem. And then, I would say basically your love for God. So we say love for God. Everybody says they love God, but everyone loves God differently. Do we love God what we like? Like in my house, my family, we lay down our life for God. My wife and I, our children see that. We have a high standard and commitment to God. But if I have someone and my wife's the same. I don't say that I love God more than she does. We're both the same in that and encouraging each other to go more, in that. And then the fifth thing is communication. Can you communicate? There was a woman who went to the judge and came before the judge, and she said, he said, do you own a ranch? She says, no, I don't like ranch. I like Thousand Island. She said, do you have a garage? She said, oh no, we don't. We don't have a garage. We have a driveway. And so it's just going on and basically twisting all the words that they said in this problem. She's like, well, why are you getting divorced? We can't communicate. But the judge couldn't understand her either. And so, again, can you communicate? If you're always have to, there's miscommunication, it's like, well, why? We're not speaking the same language. One speaking different things. One speaking Chinese, one speaking English, one speaking Afrikaans. We're not communicating. So can you communicate and have that understanding intellectually where you can stimulate each other and communicate? If you're on different wavelengths, it's going to be very hard. And so if you have those 5 things, that's someone that can make it work. People say, well, I'm waiting for God to speak to me. The Bible says when a man finds a woman, he finds a good thing. So the man looks for the woman. It doesn't say when God gives the man the woman. And so, and can you imagine, there's only one person out there for us. So Samson messed up. He married the wrong one. So now all of us are messed up. That would be crazy, right? And so I think, God gives us the choice to choose. And then again, choose to love the one you've chosen. But looking at those 5 criteria, if you have those things, I think you have what it takes to have a lasting marriage. But you're still going to have to work at it. It's not about finding the right person. It's about being the right person. But those things will help you. I think those things, you have the building blocks to do it. But if you can't communicate, you don't have different values, you have different calls in life, your love for God, is waning, and you don't have physical attraction, you're going to have a very hard time sticking together. Yeah. Any follow-up questions or along that?
I have a separate question if we want to switch topics.
Sure.
So how should we read the Bible?
Very good. We should have done that one from the beginning, man. That's the how do we read the Bible? You want to jump in, Yahira?
Yeah.
Starts with the Bible.
Everything, the Bible is foundational. I think how do you read the Bible? Kind of generic in the sense of, we all should be reading the Bible. I think it's going to look different for everybody depending on the season of life that you're in. Maybe there's questions that you have and, the Bible has the answers to whatever questions you have. So whether that's, doing research, like where can I read about this? Or maybe there's a devotional that you're following. I know at church we're doing the Bible in 365 days. So it's like you're following that, right? Bible reading program. That's what I meant. So it's like you can do that and follow along. And I know that there's even different resources that you can use. But one thing that Pastor Susan actually, taught us is like when we're reading the Bible, because sometimes I think it's easier to read the New Testament versus the Old Testament, because the Old Testament is just like, who begot this, who begot that. I was like, God, why do I need to know this? But, it is important to understand, history and whatnot. But I think if I can recall correctly, there's like 4 W's we look for even when we're reading, like, what is God's wisdom in this? What are his ways? What are his warnings? And I believe the last one was will. So it's like, those 4 W's could even be like foundational as you're studying the Bible. Like, what is God trying to teach me? What can I get from this? And like, how can I apply it like into my life that will help me, navigate? Because there's so much like wisdom in the Bible. Proverbs alone is a book just based on wisdom that you can reference when you have those questions. But it's going to look different for everybody. The way I read the Bible versus Chris versus, Aaron is different. But I think at the end of the day is like reading the Bible to grow, but also to know who God is, know what he did. And that's part of how you develop a relationship with him. So I think developing that discipline of reading the Bible and studying it, not just reading it to read it, so that you can learn and grow from it. And, I think, I'm not sure if it's a quote, but it's like, as you're reading the Bible, like the Bible's reading you, because it highlights like, ooh, yeah, I kind of need to work on this, or, like different verses will speak differently to you. So allowing the Bible, to read you as well. And it's like, okay, maybe you're struggling with a person and, what does the Bible teach you when there's conflict? And it's like approaching the other person, or how do you deal with it? So I think I went off on a couple tangents, but really at the end of the day, it's like reading it to understand, and also being consistent with how you're reading it, and developing your relationship with God. So
Good. You want to jump in, Chris?
Yeah, I think, great questions. This is a tough one, because it is. I think it's a season of your life. If you haven't ever read the Bible before, like, where do you start? And I've always started in the New Testament. For me, that worked for me. And trying to understand, I started reading the Old Testament many years ago, and I was like, I didn't understand. But when I read in the New Testament, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it's kind of where I started. And I was like, oh, wow. And I started asking questions. I'm like, why are some of these scriptures in red? Like, what does that mean? You know, oh, that's Jesus is speaking. And so it helped really open it up for me. And then as I developed and I started reading more, just as Yahira said, just asking questions like, God, what are you saying to me right here? What are you speaking to me? Like, why was this written in this way? What am I to gain out of this? And as you do that, you will find yourself navigating through the Bible. And if you have one that has references on the side that tie to like Old Testament, then you go like, oh, okay. So then you start flipping, and next thing you know, you find yourself in the Old Testament, you find yourself flipping through the Bible, and you're seeing the dots connect, and God is speaking to you through that time. So yeah, I think it's just very challenging that it depends on what season you are and what you're looking for. But I think researching sometimes to find answers if you're going through a difficult season or a challenge in life and you're like, I don't know where to start. Yes, maybe Google, ask your friends, ask people that know, and let them point you in the right direction. But the most important thing is to open it up and to really dig in and start reading the Word and just asking God the questions.
Yeah. So I would kind of answer for a new believer. I remember when I first, was growing up in church, I was in a church and everything was King James. That was the and I was lost. And then I got an NIV Bible. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can understand this. So, there's different translations that are out there that are simpler to read, like the New Living Translation, NIV, that, being in college or being it helps. It's easy to understand. I think that's good to read. Then, when you go to study, you have your New King James, which is going to be more towards the Greek and the Hebraic, the Aramaic. And so the translation, but just start out like a Bible that you can just read and the Word speaks to you. In that way, in the way that it's translated. Why do we have different translations? Because some are, they're more topical, they're more narrative translations, and there's others that go, they stick very strictly with the Greek and the Hebrew, which is more for a study Bible. But they all have the same meaning. It's just a different way of saying it. And so, as I study now, I use different translations, and I like to look at different versions because sometimes it just says it clearer. In that. And so that kind of helps us to do that. But I agree, I think we mentioned about reading the New Testament. The Old Testament is a type and shadow of the New. So if you read it, you're not going to bring the old through the new, through the cross. And so when you read the new, then later when you read the old, you understand the overall purpose of God and Christ and bringing Jesus, and you see the prophecies and it makes more sense to you. But if you just start reading Genesis through, you're probably going to get lost in Leviticus and not continue, And so, but reading the Gospels talk about Jesus, the revelation of Jesus as the Son of Man, the Son of God, and as the leader and these things. So you read the Gospel. Then Acts is the story of the birth of the church, and then you've got the epistles, which are the letters to the Christians, that are epistles that are written, and then moving into the Revelation end time stuff. So when you read through that, you might not understand everything, but it makes who Christ is, his teachings. It teaches you the ways of how to be a Christian. And so when you have that, that's the foundation. Then when you can go back, of course, the old, you're going to find things in it, and it references things in the new, and it kind of causes the New Testament to come alive even more. But starting out there, when I started reading the Bible the first time to read through, I would always read the New Testament first, and I'd read a few chapters, and then I'd read one proverb in the morning and one psalm at night. So they say you have a proverb in the morning, it's wisdom for the day. You have a psalm at night, it's wisdom, it's comfort for the soul, because we can relate to David. And so that's something I just did, and I found it, really beneficial. But there's a lot of Bible apps out there. There's a lot of, Bible reading programs. But the important thing is that you read. The Word is a light unto our path. It's a mirror. So it shows us, like Yahira was mentioning, our lives, and God speaks to us, and asking God, hey, God, speak to me through your Word, not reading it as a just history book, but reading it as like a manual for your life. And then the Word is not only a mirror, it's a lamp into our path. So it teaches us how to do life. And I think when we come that way, that's when, the Word, it's enjoyable, it speaks to us, and, it helps us practically in life. Yeah. Good. Any follow-up on that, or anyone else got any other questions?
All right, I have a follow-up questions about Bible apps. Where I come from, like, they frown upon Bible apps because they say that you can't pray with Bible apps as compared to like having the physical Bible, maybe if you want to pray with it. So what is the issue on that?
I think, I'm old school. I love reading a book. Even if I'm not reading the Bible, another book, I like to have a book in my hand. I like it. But I find like with the digital, and now with you have iPads and you have Kindles and things like that, you can actually highlight, and there's features that are there, and then it saves it for you. So when I'm studying, I actually like the digital because I can do notes and do all of this, and I have all this app. So I think sometimes when we're old school, we're resistant to technology because we think it's taking away from the Bible. But yeah, if you're doing study and and you're technologically savvy and you know how to flip over and do notes and all of that, it's actually a powerful tool because you can cut and paste, you can copy and paste, you can highlight, you can cross-reference and do notes. And so like to study, I find that very powerful. So even like when I'm really studying, preparing, I have a laptop. I have 5 to 10 versions open, Bible commentaries, all this stuff on there, and it's all digital. But if I had to carry all those books around, I'd need a staff and be hurting my back with a backpack. I'd need 2 backpacks full of books. But because it's digital and I can search with a search function, I can find all this cross-referencing in it. So I disagree with that in that sense. But I think, if you're young and that's like advanced level studying and you're just reading, it's nice to have a Bible. Mark it up, write in it, do that. Sometimes when we're reading digital, we get distracted. Texts are popping up and Facebook notifications and it turns off. But I think, with the younger generation, the millennials, all that, they're digital. They don't have notebooks. They don't, even at school, they're on their laptop. To say, that you can't do that, you have to get a book, and then they don't read that way. We're actually, bringing our method to them that they can't understand. If that's how their brain works and they work that way, let them use the digital. The most important thing is it's an authorized version, and they basically are reading it. But if you read it on a Kindle, you read it on digital, you read it on your phone, or you read a book, the thing about the digital is you have it with you always. And if it's in the cloud, you can pick it up anywhere. And so I still like a book, but yet I find when I'm studying, I've learned to use those tools, and it's very helpful. Yeah. Anyone add to that? Clear on that?
I think it's perfect. I mean, it's up to each individual person, I believe. Like, how do you learn? Like, we all learn a little different. Some of us like pictures. Yep. Some of us read a little better and comprehend a little bit differently. So if it works for you, then use that. Yeah. I like the old school, pick up the book, because I know that when I do the book, I'm going to be sitting down probably at my desk or somewhere where I'm sitting, I'm focused, where sometimes, on a digital piece, I might be a little more relaxed. I'm not saying that's for everybody, but I think there's a healthy balance between the two. So whatever works for you, you're not changing the word in the context of what the Bible's saying, but you're able to like sift through a great example where you're talking about like the different translations. So, I do New Living Translation as my Bible that I have, but I can't sit there and push a button on my Bible that I have that puts it in the NIV or the Message or something so that I can understand it. So I'd say, to each and every person, what your learning style is and what helps you comprehend and understand it, use that.
Yeah. Even if it's the children's Bible, it's a picture Bible. Start with something. Start with something. Good questions. Anybody else?
Just to switch, he was talking about love and like the definition of love. And I think in our society, we hear the slogan, love is love. So what are your thoughts on that slogan? And like, what does the Bible say about it?
Yeah. What is love? I think, in our woke society, all of that, love is this sloppy agape. Like anything goes, we just love. Like, it's a bit like the hippies back then, peace. But it's like all this war was going on and drugs and craziness. There was no peace. It was craziness. But like peace. So we come up with this slogan of love, but I think God is love. So the originator of love is the one who defines love. And so we got to talk about love is patient. Love is kind. We look at 1 Corinthians 13. It talks about what love is. And I think that's the best definition. If not, we're trying to define love as something that has no truth in it. And so like, if I don't hold you accountable to truth, if I hold you accountable to truth, I should say that's not love. But that's not true. The Bible says speak the truth in love, but you can't have love without truth. And so, this idea of just love, everybody love, anything goes. No. If someone's walking towards a cliff and they're going to kill themselves, for me to just say, I just love you, go ahead, jump on the cliff, that is not love. Love is jumping in front of you, putting on the headlights. Whoa, stop. Because I don't want you to just have destruction, whether you like me or not. I'm going to love you, And so this thing came up in the 90s called tough love. because at that time parents were just tolerating craziness. But sometimes love is what? You have to check your child into a rehab center because they're on drugs and they're going to destroy their life. Sometimes you have to, discipline them. You spare the rod, the Bible says, you spoil the child. If you love your child, you're going to discipline your child. If you don't teach them discipline, you don't love them, they're going to end up in jail somewhere because they can take whatever they want and do whatever they want and this kind of thing. So I think, we have to define love through the Word of God. 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind, love is long-suffering, gentle. Love has goodness in it, mercy, So this is the defining of love. If it's not that, it's not real love. And so it sounds nice, but it's not based on truth. Love has to be based on truth. And so we can't say we love someone and not speak the truth. Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in?
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but I think that slogan is also very much used so in the topic of like same-sex marriage, right? It's very well known of like, this is almost like their reasoning for like, okay, love is love. So love is okay between a man and a woman and a woman. Of course, from a biblical standpoint, we know that it's not, that the Bible defines marriage between a man and a woman, and anything that doesn't follow that goes against that is not true, right? So when it comes specifically to using love as love in that sense, I think all of us here can agree that in a biblical sense, it's man with a woman, and anything other than that is not. So I don't know if there were any maybe more specific questions on that topic, or maybe anything else.
Yeah, I think, when we talk about, Aaron has a follow-up, when we talk about love, like love is love, like just love, but if love is hurting someone, it's not love. Love doesn't hurt someone. The Bible said love prefers someone else over ourselves. So when something becomes selfish for our own selfish gratification, when something is hurtful, you can't say it's love. It goes against the character of what love is. And so this idea, love, and I can't help myself, you can't choose, you can't help who you love. I think it was Woody Allen who said this, the flesh wants what the flesh wants. Mm-hmm. And so now we call that love, but just because your flesh wants something doesn't make it right. And so we try to say because our flesh wants something, we love something. There's a lot of things we want. There's the things that, sometimes you want to hit somebody upside the head, and I'd love to do that, but that's not love. Why? Because I need to have self-control. Love has self-control. And so we need to understand that. And, what is the ultimate goal in relationship? Love is two individuals coming together in a selfless place to produce human beings and to nurture them and to raise them in the ways of God, so that we can have a family. And that's something that two men can't do, two women can't do. And so, when you look at the statistics of it, for those that are in same-sex relationships, they're not monogamous relationships. Statistics have proven that. Divorce, huge, even much higher, by double, triple of heterosexual things. Why? Because it's very much based on lust. It's based on perversion. And what is perversion? It's perverting God's original intention. And so, of course, people can do what they do. We live in a free country, but we can't, say that's love. We can't say that that's marriage, because the originator of love, the originator of marriage, has a standard and a criteria, which is God, of what he says love is and what he says marriage is. So for us to now say this is something that God never said it was, that's off, if we believe in God. And again, we can't, we love people, and people, we're not here to condemn them, but we can't, we got to have truth. If I just say a lie and reinforce a lie, that's not truth. And so what? I love my dog. You want to marry your dog? And then you have what? You have, well, I love children. Well, you're a 40-year-old man. You can't have a relationship with a child. That's abuse. But I can't help it. I love. Who are you to tell me that I can't love? Love is love. That's not love. That's child abuse. That's perversion. And that's where all these things are heading, to where, like the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, when the demons came, the angels came, the father was going to give his daughter away. That's perversion, because, I want to protect the angels. What? That's not love, And so we see all this perversion that's there. So we have to walk in the truth, but yet not be hateful, not be insensitive to people's struggle, because they don't always understand it. But come on, some of us, we love chocolate and now we love vanilla. We didn't really love it. It was just something, and our desires changed because we matured, we grew up. Yeah.
Just to follow up, someone wrote in and asked, like, how as Christians should we respond to someone like our friends or coworkers or maybe even like a family member, and they come to us and tell us that they're either like transgender or gay or same-sex attraction. How do we respond?
So how do we respond to, say, someone who's struggling with LGBTQ? Yeah, you want to jump in?
I think, when I meet somebody, like, for example, who is of, who associates as a LGBTQ, whatever, sorry, I don't know all the letters.
It's LGBTQ plus. Now.
Plus, okay. Yeah, plus. I think one thing that I've always learned is, like, you love the sinner and you hate the sin, right? So it's like, I'm not going to ostracize you, or I'm not going to not be your friend because this is how you associate, or this is the life you've chosen to live, because we know that it is a sin, but that would be like saying, like, oh, I'm not going to be your friend because you're committing all these other sins too, right? So it's not, separating the other and realizing that, I think there's a purpose always when you do meet somebody or do encounter somebody. Like, I can be a light into this person. Like, I may not try to, like, preach the gospel like 24/7, but just even me showing somebody that I want to be your friend regardless of what your views are, I think speaks volumes to people when you meet them. And, you being in that position where, you can foster those relationships, I think is important, because it's like, not all Christians are the same. And I think we get a bad rep because, we're known for hating or for this, or because we don't agree with it. But at the end of the day, it's like, no, like, God was around everybody, like the prostitutes, the tax collectors, those, that people would generally ostracize, and came, to help those people. So it's like, whatever that looks like with whoever that you meet, I think it's showing the love of God regardless, being Christ-like in their life. And you never know, honestly, like, what impact that's going to have. And I know when it comes to, like, even salvation, because I've heard stories, where people, like, just encountered God and that there was a shift. And others had a part to play. So it's like, you might just be the seed that gets dropped in them and somebody else comes and water it. So I think showing the love of God and not feeling like you have to ostracize them. We're not going to be BFFs with them either. But at the same time, it's like just being Christ-like, I think, is a good starting point.
Yeah, it's great. I'd say, we're not there to judge. We're not the ultimate judge at the end of the day. But to be there in Christ's likeness is to treat them the same. Treat them as you would anybody else. If you knew somebody was a Christian and you knew somebody was LGBTQ or whatever flavor it is, do you talk to them differently? Your conversations as they progress may be a little bit different, but when you initially meet somebody, you want to treat everybody the same. That's the love. Now we have a standard to uphold in that piece, is how much that we love God, and we have a responsibility and a duty. And I think that as we meet people that are there, they're just looking. A lot of people are just looking. They're looking for love in all the wrong places. And we are the beacon. We are the light. We have a responsibility. God places us in positions, and they're divine appointments. And you probably are. You can be the one and the only one that God chose you to do that and to be there to help intervene on that. And how you handle the situation, I believe, is what really comes out of it. Like, how do you respond when somebody says that to you? Well, let's respond with love. Let's talk to them, befriend them, and get to know. Maybe you have to get to know them a little bit, not being best friends, but just, asking questions. And then when that opportunity comes or whatever, then you get to tell your story, because they might ask you, hey, well, what do you believe and what do you do? And you'll say, hey, I go to church, or whatever that case may be. The door will be open for you.
Yeah. I think, I look at it this way. We live in a fallen world, which to me, we live in a broken world. People are broken physically. You have people that are physically challenged. Some people, they're wheelchair bound. Some people, their leg was shorter than the other. All these things happen, and they have impairments. Why? Because there's brokenness that's there. People are broken emotionally. And so, because of abuse, because of things that have happened, because of, their environment when they grew up, and they need to be healed emotionally. Can God heal physical? Yes, he can. And so people are also sexually broken. And so I think we have to look at it as that. And, sometimes it can come from all those arenas. And so when we look at that, what's the goal is to introduce them to Christ.
Yeah.
And so, I've worked a lot with homosexuals. I worked a lot with, HIV people, and when I was in Singapore and all of that. And I met someone who did a training, and he was actually, as a young man in the 70s, going through transitioning and wanted to be a he was dressing as a woman, living as a woman, and going through the transition surgery. And because of the high suicide rate, they stopped all of the surgeries and said, we're not going to do them anymore because they saw it as a mental illness, and that suicide rate was going up. So they stopped that. And if you look at the suicide rate among transgenders and those that are transitioning, it's huge. It's through the ceiling. And so, it was seen as a mental illness up until the 1970s. And then they redefined it, and try to make it as a race thing where it's discriminated against. But it's not. It's brokenness. But he said this. And so to make a long story short, he got in church, found God, got healed, was mentored by men, and became a dad, got married, lived healthy, and ministered and talked about sexual brokenness. Was a huge testimony. But when you saw him, because he took the hormone pills, all that, he had this real smooth skin like ladies. He didn't have facial hair. His body structure was a little bit different because as a young man, he'd taken all these things. And so when I met him, I first was uncomfortable. And I looked at him and he knew I was uncomfortable. When he looked at me, he laughed. He said, if you don't look at my baggage, I won't look at your baggage. And I laughed, and we just hit it off. And he said, because of our brokenness, and God does bring healing, but sometimes there's some residue that's there. And so he made this statement, which I thought was great. He said, Jesus didn't come to make everyone a heterosexual. He came to make them like him. Wow. And I think we need to approach that as the church. If we can introduce people to Jesus, their physical brokenness, their emotional brokenness, their sexual brokenness, God will work that out. God will bring conviction. But what do we do many times at the church? We're condemning certain behaviors, but a heterosexual is out there sleeping around, fornicating, is no better. An adulterer is no better just because someone is having other issues. And so we as the church, sometimes we only talk about the thing that affects us the most, or we have our pet sins, But sin is sin. Brokenness is brokenness. So I think if we can approach people like that, love them, introduce them to Christ. And that's why in our church, they say, we love, LGBTQ pluses, whatever. Are you welcome in church? You're welcome. What do you mean? I can come to church? Yeah. Well, what does the Bible believe about that? Well, that's another issue. We can talk about that later. But God will bring conviction. And we've seen conviction and, homosexuals coming, back, trans people coming back, people who struggle with that, healing and moving on. And they're like, what was I thinking? And seeing that process. And so not to belittle it, there's other issues, we could talk about this the whole day today. But I think if we approach it like that in love, but, right now, what's the issue? Everyone's talking about acceptance. You have to accept me. If you love me, you accept me. I can accept you, but not agree with you.
Yeah.
But what do people say? Oh, you have to agree with me or you're not accepting me. No. I can accept you and love you in Christ where you're at, and this is your struggle. But I don't agree with it. I don't agree with your philosophy. I don't agree with your agenda, but I accept you. And so that's the problem where people say, accept me as you have to agree and I am right. But the statistics, the science, the psychology, the physiology, it doesn't match up with the agenda that's trying to be portrayed. And so it's been debunked. And so a lot of these lies, I'm not going to accept that because it's a lie. God didn't make a mistake. God didn't put a woman in a man's body. God didn't put a man in a woman's body. What kind of God? God is a good God. That would not be a good God to torment someone like that. But it's understandable in the brokenness of society and what happens and the abuses that are there, the brokenness in family, why people start coming out, like that. And so, we love them, accept them, and walk them through it and be conducive, but we're not going to allow predatory behavior, that's there, but we love them. And you'll see people coming in, when they encounter God, God will work in their life and wholeness comes through it in their life. There may be some residue, but it's okay. Love covers. And that's what we want, is people to encounter Christ and let God deal with their business. Thank God no one's in your business all the time. or in my business all the time, because all of us got issues. None of us are perfect yet.
Yeah.
But when we come to Christ, we show each other grace, we show love and acceptance, and let God work out things. Preach the word, teach the word, but not in a condemning way, not taking the Bible and hit people over the head with it, but showing them. And those that truly want Christ likeness, they're going to be attracted to it, and God will work things out in their life, and not to oversimplify it. It can take years because there's brokenness and but God will turn things around for people so that they can have the abundant life that he called them to have. Yeah. Good questions. Anyone else?
Okay, I'll go. Back to relationship.
Okay.
How and when do I know I'm ready for a relationship?
How and when do I know relationships? So
Yeah.
I think, again, it's the season. Am I in a season where I know I want to start planning for marriage, for family? I think that's when it's like, okay, you're in the right season. For me, I had a girl I dated in high school. It wasn't God because we were called differently. I knew I was called. When the call of God came alive, we broke up. Nothing happened. She was a nice Catholic girl, beautiful girl, but it wasn't God. I just knew that this is not the one. So we broke up. I never dated anyone else from the time I was 19 until I was 26. But I was loving life. I wasn't nothing was wrong with me, But I think, it goes back to what Ira is saying. There's a freedom you have when you're single you don't have when you're married. When I'm single, you can be out with the guys. You can be out, go and eat food after church and stay out till midnight. When you're married, you can't do that. Your wife's at home. There's kids that need diapers changed. She needs, you don't have that freedom when you're married. But when I'm single, I have that freedom. So enjoy the season of your life. There's people that I must get married, kids, and they get married at 19, they get married at 20, and they have kids quickly. And that's why when they get in their 30s, they want a divorce, because they never discovered who they were. They never discovered what they wanted in life, and they got into marriage, and now they're in this life, and they're like, who am I? My whole life has been a wife, my whole life has been kids, and I don't know who I am. And so I think we need to give ourselves time. Figure out what you want to do in life. When you start college, nobody knows what they want to do. You just put something down on the paper. Most people don't. Put something down on the paper. When I started college, I wanted to be a lawyer or a banker, and I ended up becoming a preacher. And so give yourself time to figure it out. Give yourself time to find yourself. Enjoy. Have relationship with guys. Have relationship with girls. Keep boundaries there. And, it's we don't need to be afraid of the opposite sex. It's like, oh my gosh, women, every woman's trying to seduce me and every man's trying to, no, don't, see the good in people. That's not everyone, but enjoy the season of life. And when you come to the place, it's like, and my pastor told me, he's like, hey, are you thinking about getting married? And I was like, and something just clicked. It was the God, like, oh, wow. And my season changed. And now I was like, and they started asking me, what about this, trying to match with me? I'm like, no. And then he asked me a question. He said, there's got to be somebody that you like. And I'm like, Susan's a nice girl. And that's what I said. And you know what? After that, I started, and I took a while. We stayed friendship. I started, talking a little bit deeper, this kind of thing, to get to know her, more questions about this. And, and then what? We headed up. And then what? We said, let's date. I like you. And we started dating, and, people found out, and now it's public. But I also was concerned because I was very high profile. I wanted to protect her, and so it was just natural. You don't need to force it. Society's trying to force you. Hey, don't you have a boyfriend? Don't you have a boyfriend? You need a boyfriend. Don't you have a girlfriend? You need a girlfriend, push you. And then what? When are you going to get married? You need to get married. And then you get married. When do you have kids? When do you have kids? It's like, grandkids. And everyone's pushing you towards something, but everyone has their own life, My wife married, Susan was 31, I believe. I was 28 when we got married. She was 32, I was 28. So 27. So I would, which is not super old, but then what? Have kids. Oh, you got to have kids before you're 40. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So don't get caught up in that. Enjoy your season. And, when you're married, you have a freedom you don't have when you're single. You get to have sex. You don't sleep alone. You have two incomes rather than one. You have companionship. You have all those things. But you can't live your life as a single. Every decision I make, it affects my spouse, it affects my kids. Every decision, I can't just go buy what I want to buy, because how's it going to affect the family? Is it in our budget? We're planning for things. And so you must be ready for that too, and enjoy it, And I was always this thing, I better not get married. You need to be single for the Lord. After I got married, I'm better and more effective in ministry with a wife. Because guess what? The wife can talk to Yahira better than I can, because she's a woman. She's more effective because she has the protection of her husband. But society is like all these things, it's going to take you away from God. Anything God gives to you and he adds to you, it's a blessing. Then people say, kids, don't have kids so fast, enjoy marriage. Well, we had kids. We're like, what? God gives you 9 months to prepare. Come on. We had kids. We're like, this is awesome. We had 2 kids, and it's like, well, let's go for 3. It's like, it's in everything God gives you, he adds to you, And so, but enjoy this season. When you're out of season or you're pushed, and you don't have healthy development, and I think that's where people get into those problems. And so, don't be pushed by society or feel like something's wrong. What's wrong with you? You don't like girls? No, I love Jesus, and I have a lot of girlfriends. They're girls and they're friends, but we're not. I love God. I have a boyfriend. And doing that. And so, and then if you do have someone and you're dating and explore, keep the boundaries there. Keep it in friend. Don't move too quickly. And so you're not going to hurt you or hurt that person. Does that make sense? Awesome. Any good? Yes.
All right, so I have a follow-up question, and I'm taking out of quotes from what Paul said, that I think something like it should be better for men to stay single. So
yes.
How about that?
Yeah, so Paul says, I wish all men were like me, because he was single. Now, what was Paul's call? To be in prison for Christ, right? Now, if I'm going to be in prison for majority of my ministry, writing books and doing all that, all the epistles he wrote were really from prison, it's not good to have a wife and 3 kids. Yeah. Think about that. And so there is those that have the gifts of celibacy. They're single for the gospel. And if we're called, and there's some people, because of the life we're called to live, God gives us that grace, But Peter was married, There were other disciples that were married. So God was not against marriage. John was married. They had wives. They had, children. They have, history tells us that. So Jesus wasn't, because Jesus was celibate. Why? Because he was God. He wasn't called to, have a family here. He's called to have his bride as the church. And so I think there are all those that have the gifts of celibacy because they're called that way. And I think Paul was like saying, it's good that you're single for the gospel like me. You don't have all the cares. When I'm building the church and ministry, I have family. I can't just be gone on the road traveling all the time, winning people for the Lord. And I have responsibilities, which takes me away from ministry, but yet it also adds to ministry, because not only am I ministering on Sunday, but all my kids, they're also ministering. So come on, you didn't just get a preacher. You got a cameraman, you got a sound person, you got an online manager, you got a good deal with the Dunn family. So it's not taking away from the gospel. But if your call is like that, and I think God gives you a grace, and there are some societies where you're like that. There's some places, for the sake of the gospel, your family could be killed and murdered, all of that. I think I would want to be single for that. But don't make it. The Bible says in Timothy, Paul says, there are those in the last days, and this kind of the balance to it, that forbid people to marry. So the same guy who said, I wish all were like me, he's talking about single for the gospel. He says there's those that forbid marriage. So he never forbid marriage. And so that can be people who, they take that to the extreme. And I think, some people have that grace in the Catholic Church, and we love our Catholic brothers and sisters, those that are saved. But the priests, they're having problems with their sexuality because they don't have a proper healthy outlet the way God intended to it. And so, that was never in the Bible. And you look historically, it was only after, 1,000+ years that the priests took on the vow of celibacy. Before that, the popes were married. Priests were married. And they implemented that. So it was never there in the beginning of history. Does that make sense? And so be careful with that. But I think, if you really feel the call and God's speaking to you, pray about that. Don't commit it. Don't be public about it. But God does grace people. I've known women that were that way, and they just lived single for the Lord and just gave their whole lives to God. And they have spiritual sons, but they never had a family. They never had, I know men that God's given that grace. They don't have the desire. They have lots of healthy relationships, and they just stay in that zone of singlehood, and they're happy being single. I think the older you are, the more you're alone and single, the harder it is to get married, because you're very set in your ways. And so when you're set in your ways, you like everything, and now someone's going to come in and mess up your stuff and change it around, and it's a lot of difficulty. So you have to count that cost, and so it's a choice that we make. And I think, if we choose to separate ourselves to God because of the call, God will give us grace. But if you don't have the grace, don't be ashamed of that. Realize it. I think getting married, being fruitful, multiplying, having a family in God is a good thing. Yeah. Good thing. Yeah. Anyone want to add to that? Or yeah. All right. Any other questions? Yeah. Aaron.
It's just like a personal question. It has nothing to do with relationships, but I feel like today, like as college students and like in the world, we see a lot of like people being easily offended, and that relates to like lack of unity. Either we see that in our country, like as the election's coming up, or even like in the church and in families with the high divorce rate. So how, as people, like as we're going in influence and like growing older, how do we combat that? And like what are ways, even us of like little influence now in us growing up, like how do we change that mindset of the world?
Good. You want to jump in? Anything you hire?
That's a tough question.
Yeah. I'll jump in first. You can
Okay.
I think, so you talk about easily offended. People are so thin-skinned now. They get offended about everything. Oh, I'm just offended. I'm offended. It's like, well, I'm offended about your offense. It's like you're. So I think, we've got to be thick-skinned. Don't allow things to be so offended. And what's the problem? It's our identity. It's our insecurities. And anyone rattles us, we get so offended. Jesus said offenses will come. You're going to get offended. You go to Starbucks, they're late. They messed up your drink, or you get offended. Someone pulls out in front of you on the road. Someone took your car park, and people are so offended and stressed out. Like, that's life. People are going to offend you. And sometimes they offend you unknowingly. They didn't see you. They did it, and we get so offended. We carry these offenses. But what do we need to do? We need to forgive. We need to not give people the benefit of the doubt. That's Christianity, to where we don't, get offended. It's hard to offend me. Now, I'm not going to be disrespected. I'm not going to be dishonored. That's a different thing. But I'm not give people the benefit of the doubt, and we live in a culture that's so high-strung. People are so overstressed. I think since COVID especially, they're dealing with so many things, and it's like the little straw that breaks the camel's back. People go, road rage, pull out guns and the people because of traffic. Like, what? You want to kill somebody because they pulled out in front of you? Like, wow, like that's a little bit over the top. But that's real in this world. You see people going to schools and shooting. It's like, what? So there's this mental illness, I believe it is. I believe a lot of it's demonic also. Why? Because we're always just so offended, and people are grouchy and unhappy, and like you're so afraid, like you do something, it's going to cause somebody to go over the top. And I think that's the product of our society. But as believers, we're not supposed to be like that. We're supposed to walk in love. What does the Bible say? Turn the other cheek. And we teach about that. Doesn't mean someone abuse you, but it actually meant when a master would hit a slave, he would hit their cheek, and the cheek would go like that. And what would they do? They wouldn't react, but they would turn and they would look with the eyes. And what was that saying? You can hit me because you have authority over me, but you don't break me. I'm not affected by that. But what do we do as Christians? Turn the other cheek. So slap this cheek, then slap this cheek, then slap this cheek. That's not what the Bible means. We interpret that in our Western thing. But what was so here? I'm not going to be affected. I'm a bigger person, And so, in a marriage, you're quarreling. Well, I refuse to quarrel. It takes two people to quarrel. So what? I'm going to keep silent. I'm not going to, I know you're angry right now, but I'm not going to respond. Take a break, calm down, and let's discuss this. You defuse the situation. It's been proved even with bullying. If you don't react to a bully and don't give them what they want from you, you diffuse them. And so I think, when we talk about the ease of it, it shows the product. We need to understand what's going on in people where they're, and it's like, they had a lot of bad days and a lot of bad things happening to get like that. It's overreaction. And choose to put on Christ, choose not to react, choose to walk in love. And what happened? We start bringing healing in diffusing situations. And then people also will realize, wow, I'm like really overreacting. Yes, you are. And so I think that's part of understanding the problem. But if you try to get into that and walk on eggshells around people, you put yourself in bondage. Because something you're gonna do is gonna offend somebody. Somebody don't like the color of your shirt. They didn't like the way you parted your hair that day. They didn't like some comment you made. Like you're gonna live in bondage just trying to be a man pleaser, and so you can't do that. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I think the part of Aaron's question when it's like, how do we influence, because so much of our nation and our society like is divided, and it's like to put into perspective, like trying to change the whole world. I mean, we can't, like only Jesus can do that, right? But you can't control other people, but you can control yourself and how you respond in situations where like offense can come about. Like that's going to say a lot about you. But I think, people are always looking to see like, how are you going to respond? So making sure like, you're in that right headspace and mindset of like not letting your emotions cause a reaction, but it's like, no, like Pastor was saying, it's like turning the other cheek. It's like, yes, there's this riff or something that happened, but I'm not gonna make it worse with my response. And just at the end of the day, it's like, does the relationship matter to you? And if it does, it's like, how can we bring reconciliation? How can we address this issue? And like, whether that's going up to the person, like, even if it wasn't your fault, like apologizing or, talking it out. Because I think so many things can be solved just by talking it out, but you get offended. It's like, no, I don't want to talk to you. No, let's not, so now there's this division. But it's like, if you really care about the relationship, then you're always going to seek that restoration. And it's like coming, and also if there is that restoration, it's like you let it go after, like you don't hold on to it. Because it's one thing to say that you forgive or they forgive, but then, it comes up again. And it's like, well, was this issue ever really solved? So it's like letting it go. And I think our response will really show people, it's like, I could definitely be offended, or I could, act this way or be this way, but because of who I am, going back to identity, because I know I'm affirmed in who I am as a daughter of God. Like it's not going to move me, and I love you with the love of God. I may not like you right now, but I love you, and because of that, I'm not going to, add fuel to the flame, but seek to reconcile. And I think as you do that yourself, it's like, that can affect people, and like they see that, and then they next time something comes up with somebody else, it's like a chain reaction. So I think we can only control ourselves, but making an effort, to not let the offense or the situation blow out of proportion, and always seek to like reconcile is what I would add.
You want to add anything?
Yeah, I think you nailed it earlier as well, Pastor. You talked about communication. I mean, I think a lot of what I see of the offenses that come up is there's so much social media that responses and communication come in the form of, I don't know, Instagram, tweets, quotes, small snippets of things that are conversations that can really be easily misinterpreted. So there's the power of sitting in front of somebody and seeing their body reaction and having a conversation with them diffuses a ton of things. It brings clarity in most times in situations that you don't. And so I think communication, one, and really seek to understand. Like, well, what is going on here? Why would they be offended by it, or what's troubling them? And then take advantage of that opportunity. Is I believe, again, we all have an opportunity for something. So if somebody's offended by what you said, and you're able to, it's a relationship like a friend that you want to carry on and have those good conversations, then you might be able to help unlock something that they're in bondage from, or that they've had issues or whatever that they don't know how to cope or heal or understand because they just were never taught. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think, Matthew 28 talks about if you have offense, go to the person that's offended you and show them the offense, tell them the offense. But you don't go to attack them. Most of the time, people didn't know they offended you. And so you're going, so what? That you can release forgiveness to them. You want restoration in the relationship. And I think in dealing with people, if that's the goal, misunderstandings happen, miscommunication, offenses happen, but we want to restore relationship. But then you have the other people, they just thrive on drama. The drama king, the drama queen, everything becomes like, oh my God, I'm a fan. And it's like they're always irritated with someone, gossiping, girl drama, guy drama, all this stuff. I have to say, look, like, I want to minimize drama in my life and stress in my life. Like, I cannot have people around me that are like that. And so I choose who I let into my inner circle. We love everybody, but not everybody's going to be in my house, because I don't want drama in my house. Come on. We got enough going on with people and all the stuff, and we try to minimize drama and walk in love. We're not going to have slamming doors and offended with each other and cold wars going on. It makes it stressful. Nobody wants to come home. This is a strife-free peace zone, And so also recognize there are people like that. A lot of you mentioned, out there in politics, and that they thrive. It's their outlet on social media, on Facebook and all this stuff. And even sometimes we get attacked, for stuff that we say. And we're very careful. We back up what we say through research, through the Bible. But they get offended. But they're not really dealing with the issue. They're just angry with God and just wanting to attack you. So I dialogue with them once or twice. The third time, 3 strikes, you're out. You're blocked. Because this is my account. I have no responsibility to entertain your nonsense. So if you don't like what I'm saying, don't follow me. And I think we need to not be ashamed of that. Not the first time. But like, I'm not going to carry on and let this person steal my joy and waste all my time talking nonsense, and they don't even know what they're talking about. Like, no. That's why we have the delete button. And putting those proper boundaries there and not being ashamed of that, So, yeah, kind of take on that. I think we've got a time for about maybe 2 more questions. Anyone else? Yeah.
Well, so it's a different question from what we are discussing. So
okay.
So I have friends that are of different religions. So, some are Muslims, some are Buddhist. Coming to soccer as well. So as a Christian, how do I share my faith with them so that I wouldn't appear as being forceful or kind of denying them of their faith or anything?
Yeah, very good. So, Buddhist friends, Taoist friends, Muslims, different people, different religions, we want them to be safe. I think we, and I'll let you guys jump in, but to me, like, we need to understand it's not the typical way of taking the Bible and beating people over the head, because we have their book, they have their book. I love the words of Saint Ignatius. He said this, if you heard me preach very long, I always bring this up, He said, preach the gospel and use words when necessary. So I think the greatest way of preaching the gospel is our lifestyle. When people see Christ in us, see how we treat other people, see the love that we have, they're drawn to us. There's something different about us. And then we can share it's Christ. You look at the other religions and you look at, the Muslim faith, and there's good Muslims. I have friends that are Muslims and we love the Muslim people. And, I was in Indonesia traveling, and I mentioned to someone, and she's like, you're a Christian, I'm a Muslim, and I was like, well, Jesus loves you. And she's fine. And I said, what's the difference between a Christian and a Muslim? And she said, Christians can eat pork. She really had no idea what she believed. She wasn't taught, but she's raised. And so many times it's a family thing, but they're not really full on in embracing the teachings because they don't even understand them, but we just love them. Just invite them. We're doing a potluck at church. Come and have a free dinner. But you're Christians. I was like, well, you're welcome. If you want to come, we're not going to tell you because you're a Muslim you can't come to church. And we didn't go out and try to proselytize and all of this thing, but just loving people, and when they saw community, they saw love, it's attractive. You look at the Buddhists, it's about striving for enlightenment, and I've studied other religions. You understand where they're at, it's all about works. No other religion is about a relationship with God who's actively involved in our life. So when they see the reality of that and they see love, that's the calling card, and I think secondly, I'd say in the midst of them having opportunities and things they're going through in their life, look for the opportunity to pray for them. Hey, is it okay if I pray for you? Well, I'm a Buddhist. It's okay. I can pray. And you pray for an area in their life they're struggling, or a financial problem or marriage problem, and God starts moving in that area, or say, hey, I'm going to get my whole Connect group to pray for you. Is that all right? I'm going to tell my friends at church we're going to pray for you. And then check in with it, and God does something. What do they immediately think when it happens? Was that God? Was that Jesus? And their hearts get open. And I think, those two things are there. I think rather than arguing doctrine, Jesus never won anyone over by arguing doctrine, because we all have our books, and our ways. But I think it's the reality of God in our life. living Christ, seeing transformation, how we treat people, and then the power of answered prayer. Those are the things that opens people's hearts like nothing else.
Well, no, I just think because I also like have friends that are like of a different religion, and I think so much of like our initial response is like, one of us is right and one of us is wrong, and it's like, no, it's not about being right or wrong. But I think I agree with what I agree with what Pastor's saying of that quote. It's like, preach the gospel and use words when necessary. Because I have a coworker who's actually like a Jehovah's Witness, and we haven't gotten into arguments, but like we've built the friendship, across the years. And sometimes he'll share things about like his faith, and I listen more so to understand like, where is he coming from, like what ideologies have like formed him, and like some of the things I share about like my beliefs, right, is like almost come off as shocking to him. But neither one of us is coming with the attitude of like, I want to bash you or you're gonna bash me, but we can still be friends, even though we may have different faiths. And I think, as he sees the influence or the favor, or even just like how I live my life, how I carry myself, like I've even seen like just how it kind of like sparks this curiosity in him. And it's like, oh, so yes, very much so. Other religions are based on works, whereas us is like based on relationship with Jesus. So I think really just being and walking as a Christian, being the light, and how you treat others, whether that's in the workplace, whether that's, in school, I think will affect people and see like there's something like different about you. It's like maybe you've known other religions, but like you particularly like will stand out. And I think even being intentional even about praying for them, if you're wanting to encourage them, or if you're wanting them to kind of see the light, so to speak, being intentional about praying for opportunities, like, God, how can I speak life, or what opportunities can you open where like I can invite him to church, or just be available for that person. And you'll see, like, again, it's not that we're trying to like remove or convert right off the bat, but at the end of the day, we know the truth and we know what the truth has done for us, and it's just about them experiencing that same truth. So I think having the heart of God for people, and knowing that you can be friends with them, because your foundation is set, you have your faith, and knowing that God can bring opportunities. So
Yeah, I'm reminded of like Paul in Ephesus. When we went to Ephesus and they worshiped the goddess Diana, and it was all their mythology that was there. But Paul didn't go up and say, you're worshiping a demon and that's made in an idol. What did he say? He said, can God be put in a box that's made with human hands? And he's saying the God that you're seeking is not in this idol, but your God, the God is in heaven, and he sent his son, and he preached the gospel. So what did he do? He brought around their search for God and brought it around to Christ. And I think, sometimes as Christian, and, we bash other religions. Every Muslim's a terrorist. No, there are good Muslims out there that are God-loving, fearing, and Muslims, they're Ishmael. Isaac, we have Isaac, the Jews. Ishmael is where the Muslims came from. They're still under the Abrahamic covenant. There's things that are off in their teachings and things, but they're not bad people. And so don't get anti-religion, and take around their search and bring it through. The Jews, in Judaism, and what they do, they haven't received the Messiah yet. But when Jesus comes back, they're going to receive him. They're going to come into Christ, and those Jews that have are Messianic Jews. So looking at the Buddhists, don't bash them. And people make fun of her. Preachers say Buddha's fat and Muhammad's ugly, and all, and like that is not Christ. Jesus would never do that and offend someone, and their because a lot of it's their culture, their family, and I think Christians, we need to be educated, understand where they really understand their search for God, understand where there are things that are off, and again, love them, bear a testimony, do that. You win people through love, not through bashing them or arguing. Arguments cause wars, and that's why if men go into battle with egos, there's going to be a world war. Yeah. Because men have big egos, but we need to come in with love and act how Christ would be. He never bashed. He'd only bash religion. He never bashed other faiths and people that were genuinely concerned. All right, I think we got time for one more question. Who's got the last question? One more question.
I wanted to ask about the questions in the bowl, but
Oh, the one in the poll?
nobody's
Okay.
really that.
Is there someone in the bowl? Does anyone else have any question? We
think-
do have some people that wrote in.
Yeah,
We
those are the
can,
big
uh,
questions.
Pull one out. Pull one out. Oh, these must be the
These are the hard questions that
are the
nobody
hot
wanted to
topics,
ask.
all
Oh
right.
Lord, what am I gonna get?
anonymous questions.
Okay. Oh, I think we kind of answered this one. Should I read the New Testament before the Old Testament?
All right.
So I'll
Yeah.
I'll pick a different one. Why is sex only reserved for marriage in the Bible?
Ooh, okay. Chris.
Hot potato, hot potato. Yeah, I think, well, you need to look back about the relationship. You know, God made man and God made woman, and to be in a covenant with each other, to partner with each other, and not to have sex outside of that. We are called to procreate, and you don't want to do that outside of a marriage. You want to have the covenant and the relationship and find somebody that you want to spend the rest of your life with. And so, yeah, I think having, a relationship outside of marriage and sex outside of that is not the norm, is not the standard. If it was, then everybody would just be doing it all the time. And it would be easy just to go and do whatever that you please and what you wanted, but you wouldn't be held to the truth. You wouldn't be held to the standards and the things that you're called to be held to. So yeah, I really think it just boils down to protecting the covenant and understanding your covenant with God and who you are, and the covenant that you have with the person that you're married, man or woman, whatever you're getting married to. So yeah.
Yeah. So I think, we go back to Genesis when God told Adam and Eve, he to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And, the command was to have dominion. It was through family, having children, raising up families in the ways of God. And then he says later on, he goes, and a man shall leave his father and his mother and shall cleave to a woman and shall become one flesh. And so the goal is, when you come into a marriage, the Bible says the two now become one. It's spiritually coming together in unity, emotionally, mentally, intellectually coming together, but also physically. And so through the act of intercourse, where there's penetration and there's joining together with a man and a woman, what happens? That one flesh happens, but in that it's also a spiritual connecting, it's also emotional connection, and that's God ordained that to be within the covenant of a marriage, to where there's protection. And so when a woman gives himself to a man, she's being vulnerable. Then what happens if the man there's no protection there? The woman's going to be insecure. She's going to be resentful. And so then what she's going to do, become controlling and manipulative. And then what's going to happen? The guy's going to run, because he didn't sign up for that. And what you have brokenness. And then what does she do? She goes and finds another man and becomes one with him and finds another man. So, you've got women that are joined to all these people, and they've given part of themselves, and they're soul tied with these people. And then they don't know why they don't have peace of mind, and they can't have a healthy relationship. And so God ordained that to happen between one person within the boundaries of marriage. And so the world makes sex just physical. It's just fun. Just enjoy, just go and sow your root, your oats, and that's how, but that's foolishness. It's a lie, because you're out there giving yourself to all these other people, and it affects you spiritually. Now, God can heal people, God can restore people, but it brings about brokenness in our lives. And so we need to understand what sex is for. It's to be enjoyed within marriage. It's to be enjoyed of the two coming one and joining together. But if you haven't committed to a relationship in that, and then you're going out and doing that, and there's people, they just go out and hook up and have sex, and they're broken people, and then what happens when you have a relationship with someone? You're having a relationship with everyone they've had a relationship in the past. So what happens? It brings brokenness into people. So anything that God does and puts a boundary there, it's not to keep us from enjoyment. It's to keep us from hurting, And so God can bring health in that, but, and restore us, but it's a process. And so we got to understand what actually sex is about when we think. It's not just a physical thing for enjoyment. It's joining of souls. It's joining of hearts, of minds. And so God doesn't want that to be able, we're just joined with everybody. And what do we have? A piece of us all over the place. And no wonder we feel broken. And so I think that's the easiest explanation out of it, And out of that, what happens? Emotional hurt, physical hurt, diseases, unwanted pregnancies. Because what's the purpose of sex? To have children. Is it just for children? No, it's also for enjoyment. But God said that. And then what do? Well, I don't want children, and we abort them. And now we committed murder again. And so what are we doing? We're going through this process and like, well, it's my body. Well, you had a right to keep your body to yourself. But you went out and did it knowing with an educated mind what's going to happen, and you don't want to take responsibility. And we come to the place we don't want to take responsibility for a relationship. We don't want to take responsibility for a thing. We're out there, and we're dishonoring and disrespecting the marriage covenant that God ordained. I'm not trying to simplify the whole abortion issue. That's a whole other topic. We can maybe have round 2, and nothing off limits, part 2, and come back with some more questions. But again, for health, and isn't it better when you meet someone and say, hey, I saved myself to give myself as a gift to you? How much more beautiful is that than like, oh, I've had 20 partners, And what are you going to do? It also brings issue. Now you're comparing that spouse to all those other people. It sets up for a lot of heart. But if you kept yourself for that one person as a gift to give to that one person who you choose to spend the rest of your life with, what a beautiful thing. I think we need to celebrate that, and there's brokenness and people falling short, not to condemn people, Christians struggle, but let's get back to God's way of doing things, get back to what's healthy, and we celebrate that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for being here. Nothing's off limits. We got to do a part 2. This was fun. And we have more questions in the bowl. We didn't get to everything, but thank you guys for your time, and hope this was enjoyable and helpful for you guys. And for those watching online, if you have any questions, you can also put it into the comments there. We'd love to ask them. Or any questions you have for the next episode, we'd love to hear from you. We'll see you next time.